Hello and welcome once again to Straight Bat, my weekly blog where, as the title suggests, I comment with a straight bat. The title of this week's blog is rather intriguing, you'd think. Is the Congress a pro-Muslim party? And where does that leave the party's secular credentials? I raise this and take you back first to the India Today media conclave of early 2018, when Congress President Sonia Gandhi made a rather candid, if startling, confession to some. The BJP, she said, had managed to convince many people that the Congress is a Muslim party. The Congress President's remarks, in a sense, were a tacit admission that Nehruvian secularism had lost out to the rising tide of political Hindutva. Her words also echoed the A.K. Antony Committee's report that was made in the aftermath of the 2014 Congress debacle, where the Congress, according to the report, which was never made public, was being seen as an anti-Hindu and a pro-Muslim party. Now, 3 years later, as we enter another election season, the Congress's predicament is even more stark. The party's secular identity is once again being challenged as its critics accuse it of openly aligning with Muslim parties. Now, in Kerala, you've got the Congress's long-standing alliance with the Indian Union Muslim League, which the BJP and the left are targeting. In Assam, you've got the Congress tying up with the AIUDF, the All India United Democratic Front, headed by a businessman turned politician Badruddin Ajmal, where again Ajmal has been very open. He in a way represents or reflects the concerns of the Bengali-speaking immigrant large population of Assam. And in West Bengal, the Congress is now part of a left-led alliance which includes a party called the Islamic Secular Front, which has just been formed by a local cleric there, Abbas Siddiqui, whose public utterances are highly contentious. In each instance, the BJP is unsurprisingly flagging off these alliances to in a way consolidate its own Hindu vote bank. Now, the nature of these alliances and crucially the reaction to them reflects in a way the deepening crisis within the Congress and, dare I say, within mainstream secular politics in this country. For the Congress, this is a crisis that has been building up for a while, and we can go back to the 1970s and Mrs. Indira Gandhi bringing in the 42nd Amendment to the Constitution, inserting the word secularism. Mrs. Gandhi did it in a way to consolidate her hold over power and target her political rivals, especially the Jan Sangh at the time. It was classic realpolitik. In a way, secularism for Mrs. Gandhi was not an article of faith as it was for her father Jawaharlal Nehru, because by 1980, when she came back to power, she was flirting with communalists of all hues, from Muslim parties and, dare I say, even the Vishwa Hindu Parishad at the time. In fact, she even, unfortunately, patronized the likes of a religious secessionist like Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, and that, to my mind, eventually tragically cost her her life. Once Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister, he too put further strain on the secular space by again appeasing both Hindu and Muslim fundamentalists. So you had on the one hand the Shah Bano case and the overturning of the court judgment. You had the Salman Rushdie book being banned, so Muslim fundamentalists were being placated, and then you had Rajiv also agreeing to open the locks of the Babri Masjid, allow a Shilanyas to take place, all of which eventually, the tragedy of the 1980s in particular was running with the secular hare and hunting with the communal hound that in a way through this turbulent decade eventually resulted in L.K. Advani's Rath Yatra, the demolition of the Babri Masjid in 1992 and the ascent to power of the BJP and the wider Sangh Parivar. Now, since then, the Saffron Brotherhood has gone from strength to strength, while the Congress has struggled to find an ideological and organizational response to the challenge that is posed by strident and divisive Hindutva nationalism. The Congress has oscillated in a way between a Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister affirming that minorities, particularly Muslims, have the first claim on government resources, to a Rahul Gandhi who before the Gujarat elections of 2017 was temple hopping and his party was asserting that he's a true Janyodhari Hindu. As a result, the centrist political space that rejects religion as a marker of your political identity has over time been hollowed out, leaving behind an empty shell, my friends, of platitudes and compromises. Today, the Congress, therefore, in this election season, finds itself caught between a rock and a hard place. If you appeal to any kind of Hindu sentiment, you are seen to mimic the BJP and become just a B team of the original party of majoritarianism. Remember, a few years ago, Kamal Nath, when he was Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, tried to play cow politics, but it had very little resonance on the ground. On the other hand, forging alliances with smaller Muslim-centric parties, as the Congress has done at the moment, also is only a short-term fix with uncertain electoral gains and certainly with no long-term strategy in mind. For example, in Assam, by tying up with the AIUDF in the backdrop of the surcharged atmosphere of the Citizenship Amendment Act politics, the Congress may well win lower Assam with the large Muslim population, but there will be a counter polarization in other parts of the state. In a sharply divided Bengal, a tie-up with an Islamic cleric party further undermines the Congress's secular credentials. It perhaps alienates the Bengali Hindu voter and also divides the Muslim vote between Mamata Banerjee and the left Congress ISF alliance. That in a way makes it easier for the BJP to win constituencies. So the irony is also here that the left, which attacks the Congress's alliance with the Muslim League in Kerala, is the one which is driving this alliance with the Islamic secular front in Bengal. And I don't know how you can call that in a way anything other than in some ways an alliance of pure unholy opportunism. And in a way it reflects again the underlying hypocrisies in the secular project that have weakened it morally and politically. Sadly, the worst sufferers as a result of the credibility crisis that is facing what I call negotiable mainstream secularism have been the minorities. They are isolated and demonized by the Hindutva right wing, particularly the Muslims, and this rightward lurch in Indian politics has made the minorities fearful and resentful. Their anxieties and grievances are not being fulfilled or not being sort of addressed by the so-called secular parties. As a result, many younger Muslims in particular are turning to the likes of an Asaduddin Owaisi's party, the AIMIM, because they see in Owaisi a sort of protector and a defender of the faith. In the recent Gujarat local body polls, for example, Owaisi's party actually became the main opposition party in Modasa town and won half a dozen seats in Godhra. So Owaisi's party continues to expand, and in most of these places, they are winning seats that were originally held by the Congress. In a sense, even Muslim voters, my friends, are perhaps looking for alternatives that go beyond the cliched and, dare I say, bogus definitions at times of secularism in this country. As a postscript, the BJP has attacked the Congress's secular vision for aligning with an Islamic cleric's party in Bengal. However, the BJP happily advertises the fact that India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, is run by a saffron-robed Hindu priest who headed a religious monastery. So let me ask you one question at the very end. Are the rules of vote bank politics and definitions of secularism very different for a yogi in a temple to that of a Maulvi in a dargah? Think about it. This was The Straight Bat. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel for many more such videos. and thanks for watching.